Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Call the meeting to order. We're just Pastor May and Jazz and I in the City Hall here, and we've got lots of good books on the screen. So why don't we start by doing some introductions? Pastor May, do you want to start?
All right, again, Pastor Leon May, Reverend of Desert Community Church, Interdenominational Ministry Alliance of Anchorage and Vicinity, Martin Luther King Jr. Foundation of Alaska.
And I'm Thea Agnew-Benben, one of the co-chairs of the committee. Jasmine?
Jasmine Akers, records clerk and staff to the committee.
Okay, let's go through everyone on Zoom. Lucy, do you want to start us off?
You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry,
Okay.
Lucy Henson from the Polynesian Association of Alaska. Hello.
Thanks for being here, Lucy.
Okay, Lucy.
I'm Key. Key, do you want to go next? Oh, there we go.
Hi, we're done here. Hi, my name is Chi Getty. I'm the president of the Korean American Culture Center, Alaska. Hi, everyone.
Great. Thanks for being here. Mila, want to go next?
Hello, my name is Mila Vang. I am the Language Interpreter Center Program Director at the Alaska Institute for Justice.
Heather?
Hi, Heather Ireland with Anchorage School-Based Health Centers.
Great. And Issa?
Hey everyone, it's Stratrasano, State Refugee Coordinator.
Great. And Felix?
Hey everyone, Felix Rivera, Anchorage Assembly.
Great. Thanks for being here. Is anyone else online that you can't see? Okay, Cameron.
Hi everyone, are we using the microphones? Not really.
We are, but maybe we don't have to. Do we
Okay,
have to?
Cameron Perez Verdina, Anchorage Assembly, good to see everyone.
Do we need to use them for the recording?
I think we can hear without them.
Oh, really? Great. Yes, that's awkward doing that.
Oh, can I just say something really quick?
Yeah, do.
Just wanted to share, for those of you here, I've been quite absent over the last month or two, and I just want to apologize for that. And I'm back, and I'm ready to re-engage in this work, so thanks.
Great. Glad to have you.
Yo, yo.
Okay. Unfinished business. So first on the list is an update on the Asian Pacific Islander and Desi American Action Resolution. I think Key and Lucy and Taffy were all working on this. Who would like to give an update?
I do. I think this is Lucy. I believe that we've seen a lot of email came through on this update. And I myself, because the proclamation, the document was created by a few members of the communities, and they were involved in putting this together. So I believe that what we have is what we can stay on and let it go to the assembly. I also believe I like what Taffy had brought up, but I think that would be a whole separate proclamation. Then there's more health stuff that we can add on that proclamation in regards to Pacific Island and Asian community.
Okay, because Taffy's suggestion was to add a portion that would address the need to separate out data related to different communities and make sure that they're disaggregated so you can track those communities separately. So Lizzie, you're saying you think that's part of a different resolution?
Yeah, and I think that is all included in our health too, because we were having issue with our COVID at the time. And I can understand what Taffy is coming through, but I think there's more than just that we need to talk further about it. And then once we collected more about that in reference to our data, then I think that will be a possibility that we can look at and draft a whole different proclamation in that view.
Yep.
Yeah, Ms. Lucy, you said the resolution as is ready to be sent forward?
That's correct.
Okay, so I guess we.
There's just one thing that I wanted to see if it's possible with the group. I don't know if he's listening, but I like that last paragraph that we add, that we were talking about the culture awareness flag day. I want to move that up to be the first paragraph of the proclamation. But wording of the proclamation stay the same, and I don't think there should be any change that we can look into, do any updates on it.
Okay, so has anything changed since the last time we viewed the document?
There's no change. We sent to you guys the last document that we have updated, and we sent it to you, and I think that's the last one that you guys were looking at when we missed that day of the meeting.
Okay.
And then you sent it back to us with a couple of things to edit on there, and we didn't feel that it should be, it was a purpose of recognizing anyone, and we didn't feel that what Tafi had added on there would also put in there. We all agree that it would just send it the way that we sent it to you guys, and then have it agree on, and then send it to the assembly.
Okay.
I agree what Lucy said. As far as moving up the naming of the organizations who are the main organizers of the AAPI Heritage Festival, I personally don't care whether they are moved up or not, but I think that was one thing that was agreed at the last meeting.
So it's basically just moving that piece up and keeping the document the same.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on this?
I do have a question though. When I was looking at the document that was sent back to us, on the top of the document, it said it was prepared by our committee. And I wanted to know, how is that prepared by our committee? Because I was questioned by some of our community. Is this prepared by our Anchorage Equity Committee, or is it prepared by our Asian and Pacific Island community?
Yeah, I feel like that got a little confused in the last couple meetings, because Lucy, my understanding is this was being developed by your community and with Key and other folks, and then you brought it here for review and input. But I don't think this committee developed it or has any kind of ownership in it.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't actually bring it into our committee. It was brought into our committee by somebody to be on our agenda, and that's how I found out. So
that's right.
I wanted to clarify that.
Yep, I think that's totally right, Lucy. But Assemblymember Dern, I'm pretty sure, brought it to this agenda. Does that sound right?
Okay. Yes. And so my question is, on there, is it created then by our committee, or is it created by, because everything else on that proclamation is from the community, and I would like to see it created by the community of Asian and Pacific Island. If that's okay with our committee.
Allie helped write it, so we can reach out to Allie.
Okay.
Yeah, this is Allie. I'm on the phone.
Okay, great. Go ahead, Allie.
I just wanted to chime in because, yes, I helped, it was actually Felix Rivera who heard a community member was talking to a community member who asked about how these recognition resolutions, specifically those that are recognizing cultural or heritage months, are drafted by the assembly members who maybe don't identify with the, don't identify with what is being recognized. So I think maybe one piece of this to keep in mind is that this is the first recognition resolution that's come through this committee or has been touched by the committee. So there's a part of me that wonders if this question about how the resolution is attributed and who it was prepared by is also setting a bit of a precedent. And so I don't think that should mean one way or the other, but just thinking, yes, there's this resolution, but there is potential for many more resolutions over the course of the year that I could see flowing in a similar way. And so just knowing that maybe what we land on today might have implications for those other resolutions is an important piece of the context as this conversation moves forward.
I like that. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me see if I have clarity. If I have clarity on that in this regard, and relative to what Ali was saying or whatever, am I understanding that resolutions do have to come forward from an assembly member, as in being prepared by an assembly member and recommended, or how does that work?
I can speak to that, or Felix.
Go ahead, Cameron.
Sure. So, and I asked the legislative services and Felix to chime in, but the process of actually developing them can happen in a variety of ways. It can be an assembly member who develops it and works with legislative services or others to develop them. There are resolutions, especially acknowledgement and recognition resolutions, that happen on an annual basis. And so those are generated often from the clerk's office, who keep those records of sort of when they come. But often they can come from the community, as somebody who approaches an assembly member and says, hey, I really want to recognize this. I have, and I think other members have had that experience as well. But who is listed on the actual document as the sponsor of it? The sponsor of it is assembly members. And so it's a great conversation to have in terms of how to recognize people who either generated the idea or who were involved in the idea or who were involved in some way. And I think that this is an opportunity, and this is a perfect example of why this committee in itself is an experiment, right? It's an experiment of how to bridge the normal processes that we use within the city and make it in some ways a little bit more authentic. And so. Okay,
so in regard to what Lucy is speaking to, and what I'm hearing is, can it be sponsored by quote assembly member and drafted by a certain community?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question for us to ask.
As being stated at the top of the document is what I'm referring to.
And I mean, certainly Felix has been on the assembly longer than me, but a lot of these things are norms that have just been established over years. And so whether there is an opportunity to create an additional box on the document or a line that recognizes someone that's outside of that particular normal system, I think it'd be really worth exploring.
Okay, so what I'm saying for this, and then I get out the way, what I'm saying for this is, if it has to be sponsored, quote, sponsored by an assembly member, then that would negate the need for drafted by, crafted by, or drafted by. So it would be sponsored by an assembly member, and that would be the focal point.
I want to say something about that, though. I like the idea of having a box, but I do also like the idea of having the community voice on this, because I think that it is important to see that the community work on this as it's their own. Now, maybe we choose, I don't know, if maybe we choose the month of May to be our first annual, whatever the proclamation is, to work on it, but we see that needs to be corrected or needs to be addition to this form in the future, that we could have more proclamation come in. My understanding in the past, I have the ombudsman's office for the city always call me and say, hey, it's almost close to May, you have your proclamation. And go into the assembly. This is the first time that we have brought it into our committee, but I think it is right that we need to talk about this, that maybe it would help those that come along in the future. But I also think that the voice of the community is very important.
So, oh, sorry, Lucy. You're breaking up a little bit, so I think we're not catching everything.
I think the voice of the community is very important. In our group here, we don't have all the communities provided or available.
Right.
So I feel that having the community, if the assembly wants to be a part of it, that's fine, or this community have to be a part of it, because we talk about it and we agree on what it's okay to send to the assembly, then maybe we could add of Asian and Pacific Island agreed on this, or created this document and then send it to the assembly. But I want that piece on there. I think it's important. I don't want the community to think that their voice is not heard, and this was created by them.
Okay, so this topic needs more time. So I'm gonna suggest that we talk about the overall process of this committee in relation to this type of resolution at a different date. I think for the one that we're talking about right now, this committee did not develop that resolution, so we should not be on the resolution as if we developed it. And I think Lucy and Key, you should work with Felix or whoever is the assembly member sponsor to decide how you want to be recognized on the resolution. I don't think that needs to occur here tonight. And so if it's okay, I'll move on, but I know Felix and Issa both have their hands up, so let's go to you first and then we'll move to the next topic. So go ahead, Felix.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I didn't know if you had saw my hand was up for a little while. So a couple things. First is, my hope is that specific recognition resolutions for review are by this particular committee are very few and far between. I do not want this particular committee, this is me speaking for myself, eating up a lot of its time reviewing specific recognition resolutions. If there are systemic issues that need to be reviewed outside of specific recognition resolutions, then I think that is valid and appropriate. There are other people, I'm getting some background noise, so can other people make sure they're muted, please? Thank you. And the second thing is, so there are 3 lines that are on the top right-hand side of any document that is brought before the assembly. Who is sponsoring that? By municipal code and charter, that has to either be an assembly member, the mayor, or Robert's Rules of Order does allow for a particular committee to bring forward a item as sponsored by that committee. So those are the only 3 things that are allowed for that sponsorship line per municipal code and per charter and per Robert's Rules of Order. The second line on the prepared by, there are 2 versions of that. There's prepared by or reviewed by, and that is typically the department that does the preparation or review. I think like Cameron was saying, there is possibly an opportunity there to be creative, which granted our system isn't one that likes creativity by and large, but there is an opportunity there to be creative and maybe do something a little different than the tradition. And that could be where we put whatever phrasing that the community would like there. And then the date for reading. So I think of those 3 lines, the prepared line is the one where we have probably the most opportunity for creativity.
Okay,
that's it for me. Thanks.
Felix, is it correct that you're the assembly member for the Asian Pacific Islander and Desi American Action Resolution?
No, so usually if it's a resolution that we see every year, then all assembly members and the mayor are on it.
Okay,
And this is one of those that we see every year.
okay. So who's the right point of contact for Lucy and Key to talk to about that issue, about who gets recognized as helping draft?
Yeah, I would say Cameron or I could be the folks who help drive that conversation.
Okay, great. Let's hear from Issa and then let's move on from.
Just briefly, let me say thank you to Felix, to you for the idea about this committee. My esteemed co-chair and I had a conversation about that recently, about us evolving into a resolution committee versus equity. And so I appreciate that commentary.
Yeah, thank you. Issa, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll be really brief. Yeah, I think I'm mirroring exactly what you were gonna say, which is like, let's move on. I think these things that are very obvious, like June would be a hot month for us. World Refugee Day, Pride Month, Juneteenth. I mean, those are annual things that happen all the time, and there's a system in place already. I do think this group should set aside time to have a larger discussion about when things occur in the moment that are not routine, right? That we may want to respond to, where we may want to have a resolution written by the equity committee, and then what that process would look like, and if we can be sponsors of it, which it sounds a little bit by Felix's sound that we can. I think that's something we should look into and have a larger discussion about, so we are prepared to do it when that situation arises. Because unfortunately, if we don't have the plan, when something does happen and we do want to respond as a committee, we're not prepared to. So I think putting this in the agenda to talk about later is important.
Sounds good. Yep, that sounds great. And I think it's also part of, in our annual plan, kind of continuing to figure out what's our structure and process for both long-term things and hot button issues. So thanks, Issa. Okay, the next item is a brief update on the resolution that we looked at. I think we looked at it for 2 meetings, right? We had a special meeting and the one previous, and we also had a subcommittee that worked on this with Assemblymember Dern. And my understanding is that this went through some pretty creative kind of compromise work together between Dern and Randy, right? I think, who's on the line. Soul. Yep.
Yes.
Great. And came up with this version, which I think passed, right?
The chairs. Yeah, that's 2 version passed.
That's 2 versions.
That's 2.
Okay, the one we have.
No, so that is a presentation document from Assemblymember
Oh, wait.
Rivera for when he
Oh, that's,
speaks.
I didn't even read it, sorry guys. Okay, but you attach it to the email? Yes, okay, so everyone's got a copy of the final version. Any comments or questions on that one?
Well, it said approved on the 18th, so that was approved.
Yep, good to go.
I would like to say that thank you. It's beautifully done. I like it much better
Oh, good.
than the original.
Good, thanks, Key. Yeah, I thought it was really good in the end too. It's great. Okie doke, let's go on to new business. So committee updates. Those of you on Zoom who would like to give an update, can you just raise your hand on Zoom just so I know who wants to give an update? And Jasmine, thank you for printing out and sharing the community events that you have on the calendar so far. And just remember, you can always submit those events to Jasmine to get them put on that calendar. Key, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead with an update.
Korean Cultural Center Alaska is having a town hall meeting this Saturday, 3 p.m. at the Korean American Community Center, 3631 Jewel Lake, in order to determine what programs that we could offer to benefit our community, such as Korean language class as well as English class, Korean calligraphy, choir, both children choir as well as adult choir, and Korean cooking And also we are looking for programs to be developed for cross-cultural exchange of diverse values of various different cultures that we have in Anchorage. And it is not just for Korean people or non-Koreans, it's for all. So I encourage anybody who's interested, or if you know anybody who might be interested, please spread the word. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Key. And Jasmine, will you be able to put that onto the calendar from the recording?
It was yours, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, Celeste and then Lisa. Go ahead, Celeste.
Hello.
Hey, we can hear you.
Okay, so I'm really quickly, I'm sorry about this, I'm at the airport, and so, but I wanted to weigh in on, first of all, the resolution that the committee had an opportunity to participate in. Well, I'm all for compromise. There were some important pieces that the committee came up with based on our experience that I feel the compromise that shouldn't be compromising on one piece in particular was white supremacy. I feel, for the life of me, I can't understand how anyone would compromise when it comes to white supremacy. And I appreciate I don't appreciate that that was even being considered to being removed. So I just wanted to make sure that goes on the record.
Sorry, Celeste, we're just looking at the changes.
So Celeste, I think, was kicked out because her connection wasn't great, and I think she's just coming back in. I think Celeste is referring to the S1 version. I think it was that Randy Solz did.
Right, but the final version has white supremacists in it. It was kept in.
It does. That is correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So you may not be looking at the final version, Celeste, because the one that Jasmine emailed us today is the final version, but it's not actually published yet because it's not signed yet. So the ones that are online are the kind of negotiation versions, not the final version.
Yes, so section 1, number 5.
Can you hear us, Les? Because we can't really hear you.
She's muted.
Yeah, I think Celeste is still having issues. I don't want to speak for Celeste, but I think Celeste has a point that she wants to make, and perhaps maybe she can make it when she has better connection issues or at a future meeting.
Yeah, just put your hand up, Celeste, if you're able to chime in again, and we'll go to Lisa in the meantime. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I just wanted to bring attention to Medicare. So we know that Medicare and Medicaid both have issues around inequity, and Medicare is particularly challenging here in Alaska, and there's a real shortage of providers, and there's an opportunity next week at the senior center on Tuesday afternoon. There's going to be a forum, and it's invitation only, so it's not just for everyone, but at that forum will be the person who is the head of CMS for the federal government, or at a high level. So someone who could really hear our concerns about Medicare in Alaska. And I think that there are some specific challenges related to language and race. And so I just wanted to bring that opportunity up. And if there are some folks who are going who could bring questions or concerns from others, I think I just would hate to have that opportunity be missed. So thanks.
Thank you, Lisa. I think I might have actually gotten invited to that. But I need to look back through my email. And are you going,
I bet
Lisa?
you did. I'm not going to be at that meeting on Tuesday, but I will be having the opportunity to have a smaller meeting with them because they'll be visiting the neighborhood health center. So I'll have the opportunity as well to bring things up, but that my conversation will be about different issues as well as Medicare. But I thought perhaps there might be some particular issues that I'm not aware of, or that people in this group that are aware of that might be important to bring up there.
Okay, is anyone else invited to that meeting on Saturday that Lisa's talking about? Okay, if people have things that they want to share in that forum, Lisa, can they share them to you that you could perhaps share in your separate meeting with them?
Absolutely, I'm happy to do that, and or to share them with people that I know will be at that meeting, the other meeting.
Okay.
And I'm happy also if people have other questions or concerns that they want to ask about, that just feel free to email me anytime. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Can you put your email in the chat there, Lisa, just in case people want to get in touch?
Was that only Medicare or was it also Medicaid?
I think it's Medicare and Medicaid, because you said CMS, right, Lisa?
That's right, but it's the federal folks. So there won't be state people, and Medicaid, a lot of the issues that we might be facing here in Alaska with Medicaid would probably be addressed at the state level. So I think that conversation on Tuesday afternoon is really focused on Medicare, but Thea is right. The person is someone who can speak generally to Medicaid and Medicare.
Thanks, that's correct. Most of the issues I would bring up are based on how the state allocates for Medicaid.
Do any other members have updates they want to share? I have one I want to bring, but it's not really an update though. I think we, in future, should perhaps add under this, this would probably be the time when we would do nominations if people have want to bring someone forward for a nomination. So I'm hoping it's okay that I do that right now. I was talking with folks at Cook Inlet Tribal Council, Leanne Garrick, and they're not represented on this committee, and they would be wonderful to add. So I wanted to bring forward to the committee the suggestion that we invite Leanne Garrick, who's their Chief Operating Officer, to join the committee to represent Cook Inlet Tribal Council. And our process is really that any member can bring forward a suggestion for a new member, and then we kind of say, kind of decide by consensus if that's okay, and if it is, then we invite that person to the next meeting. So pretty simple. So any discussion on inviting them? Christy, go ahead. Christy?
Sorry, I was on mute. Just really, really quick, I wanted to go back really quickly and let people know that the group Safe Alaskans is going to be doing a short film video about pedestrian experiences and what it's like for Alaskans who use, other forms of transportation, mainly walking, but I was able to get in on the project to share my experience as a wheelchair user. So if anyone would be interested, I can leave Samantha's email in the chat. And all you have to do is go and fill out the application, and she should get back with you. I don't think it's too late.
And sorry, Christy, is that information that you want to have entered into the calendar also?
I wanted to make people aware of it in case they were interested in applying to be in the video.
Oh, okay, so they're making the video. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you. So I see a couple comments in the chat, or at least one saying CITC would be a great addition. Is there any other discussion on inviting Leanne to participate? Lori's giving us a thumbs up.
Awesome.
Pastor Ray?
I have no further discussion on, you mentioned the consensus thing, and I think our actual document, we talk in the document about doing most of the things by consensus, but I think that's one of the areas in our document that it says a majority of the members present vote to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then my other thought on this is, as you mentioned about where, I think maybe we might put a place, if that's okay, Ms. Jasmine, under member updates and stated new member nominations.
Great, that's perfect. Yeah. Great, okay, thank you for that point of order. So I was watching Felix facilitate one of his committee meetings, and I heard him say, he didn't say all in favor, all opposed, abstentions. He just said, are any opposed? And so I'm gonna adopt Felix's norm and say, any opposed to offering Leanne Garrick of CITC a spot on the committee? Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna say that's good to go.
The other way you can do is you can say, I'd like to ask for unanimous consent.
Oh, okay.
Is there anyone who opposes it?
Great. Okay, any other member updates or any other member nominations? Okay, hearing none, let's go into assembly updates. So this is where we're going to get into kind of the meat of the agenda, mostly focused on the Committee on Housing and Homelessness. But prior to that, Cameron or Randy or Felix or any other assembly member, any other updates you'd like? Go ahead, Cameron.
Yeah, I just have two real quick updates. And one is that I think it's important because I think it really falls directly in line with this committee that folks are aware that an ordinance, a proposed ordinance was introduced and will be coming before the assembly at an undetermined time. There was also a work session on this, and it's an ordinance repealing Anchorage Municipal Code that is what leads the process of naming buildings and other fixed facilities, public places, and so it's the process that we use to name things in Anchorage, and just a really quick, I don't want to take very much time, but this was codified in 1987, and there's been a number of changes over the years, and there's been efforts to try to ensure that naming reflects Dena'ina or Alaska Native names, but the result has ultimately been, over this period of time, that the majority of our buildings, our streets, our parks have been named after primarily white men and people who are in powerful positions and do not reflect the history and the culture and the diversity of our city. And so this is a full reboot in terms of how we do that work. And I can go into more at a different meeting, but it really sets it up so that it is a more thoughtful process that thinks about our history and thinks about who we are as a city. And at a different meeting, we may have time for me to come back to the next meeting and talk more about it. But I wanted people to be aware of it. If you have questions about it, it was introduced so that the information is public, and so it's out there. The second thing I just want to share is that I was not at the meeting, but I'm assuming that the resolution that was passed related to racism and white supremacy and a lot of those things related to a particular news article that came out, and that there was some press about a particular employee that works at the municipality.
And so I just want folks to know that there's work happening to not only address that in a larger sense, but try to address that specifically within the municipality and ensure that kind of belief, that kind of speech, that kind of action is not tolerated within our municipal government. So that's it.
I don't think we all know what you're alluding to.
There's an article, a public article about Judy Eldridge and statements that were made.
Okay.
And so I just want folks to know that I've received a lot of feedback around that, especially from my perspective from the Alaska Native community, and wanting to know what action we as a community, as an assembly can take. It's a difficult thing because it's an employee, but there's a number of folks who've come together and talking about what options we have to ensure that doesn't stand.
Okay, great. One question about the ordinance for changing the process for naming places. Can you just tell everybody when is the next, opportunity for public comment on that?
I don't have that information yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have that information yet, and I will get it out. It was introduced, and there was a work session held on it, and the timeline at this point is undetermined in terms of when it's going to come before the public. But I'm hoping hopefully very soon. So as soon as I have that information, I'll get it out to the committee.
Great, that's awesome. Celeste, I see you have your hand up, and Christy, I just want to confirm that your hand is up from earlier, and because your hand is still up, but do you have something else you want to share? And if so, we'll go to... You do, okay.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay, let's go to Celeste first and then Christy. Go ahead, Celeste.
So I'm on a bus now, but hopefully you can hear me.
Yep.
I really want to go back. Okay, I really want to go back to the whole white supremacy, and I know people are tired of hearing it, but I want to, again, go on the record that there's no compromising when it comes to whether or not we tolerate white supremacy. And I was very disappointed to understand or learn that there was conversation and where the group, after we had done all of this work, was leaning toward keep removing that from the resolution. And so I'm happy to see that it's still in there, because if we compromise when it comes to things like that, then there is no reason for the existence of this group. And the other thing I want to say is, as it relates to this naming committee, we're still waiting for the naming of John Parks. We have been advocating for the naming of something significant under the name of John Parks. And, that needs to be taken up or at the forefront of this whole process. So I just wanted to get that on the record. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Celeste. And Celeste, I'm hoping you heard that in the end it was kept in there, right? You heard that part, right?
She said she's glad it was.
Okay, great. Felix, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. So I should hopefully have information soon about the naming panel ordinance as it relates to when it's going to be back before the assembly, and just some clarifying information. But beyond that, I guess responding to Celeste. So I'm not sure, Celeste, if you're familiar with the action the assembly took, sort of in, I think, in 22 or 21, naming the public transit facility after Public Transit Administration building after Mr. Parks. And I guess I'd like clarity if you know about that, or if you are looking for something more significant beyond that building to be named after Mr. Parks.
So through the chair, I heard about that. I'm not quite sure where the administration transit piece is that you're talking about that was named after John Park, but certainly something significant where people can see that something big was named after him. The administration piece, I understood it to be inside a building, maybe on a plaque on a wall of some sort. So clarification would be great. Thanks.
Thanks. Yes, I'm not sure exactly how that particular building has his name or not, but for my part, I will say when this came before the assembly, I was very clear that I didn't feel like that particular building was good enough, and that once the whole situation with the downtown transit center, which is continuing to evolve, is finalized, and honestly, that could take years. So I just need to be transparent about that. It could take years. Then at that point, once that's done, then we should name that facility after Mixter Parks as was originally planned.
Okay, I'm gonna suggest we add that to our next agenda, also under unfinished business, both to get an update of when, maybe a little bit more information about the changing process for naming places, and maybe a bit more information about the particular person and facility you're talking about right now. So let's come back to that next time. Okay, Randy, I see you're on the line too. Any updates you want to provide?
No. Sorry if my wife's talking. No real updates other than apologies last time. Also again, white supremacy. So I'll just say that and happy to be here. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for being here. Oh.
I cringe. It's kind of a point of order for me, or possibly a question relative to our process here, and it's not to put anybody at arm's length or anything like that, assembly-wise or anything in that regard, but we actually are a committee of the assembly. Is that correct?
Special committee of the assembly. Yep.
We are actually a committee of the assembly, and when we attend committee meetings of the assembly, we are allowed to participate in audience participation. And,
You mean
and
other committees?
yes, and so I guess my point is, at any time, any assembly member can come into our meeting and take a spot, or are they allowed, other than our liaisons, which we have two? And are they allowed to just participate openly without waiting for audience participation?
I guess my understanding was assembly members can participate in any committee at any time. Is that right, Cameron?
Yeah.
Okay. So that is correct.
Yeah, there are assembly members that are members of that committee, but if an assembly member attends an assembly committee that they're not a member of, they still have the ability to fully participate in that as a contributing part of it, and not necessarily wait until they
Okay, good. I just needed that clarity,
Yeah.
that understanding, and that was not to be an affront to you, Mr. Randy, but I just wanted some clarity on it, because I know this is how we participate in other, so that's a privilege for assembly members. Okay,
I would just add one thing, and I'm not sure I thought this is where you were going, and it may not have been, but as members of this assembly, or as members of this committee, it is well within your right, from my perspective, if you are going to attend another committee, for you to reach out to that committee chair, co-chair, and to ask to be put on the agenda, and to say, I rather than waiting for as a member of this committee to be able to say, we would like to request that we have some time on your agenda. So I think that's a and again, this is all relatively new, but it seems to me as a member of this committee, it should afford you the right to at least have the option of being on an agenda as a part of that discussion as a committee, as opposed to coming, unless you want to come as a citizen and just share your thoughts.
thank you for that. I think Mr. Felix had raised that once before early on in our process, and I totally forgot about it. But anyway, thanks for the clarity. And again, Mr. Soap, that was not to be an affront to you, but I just needed some clarity.
And I just took a note on that one as well to come back to in our work session around the process for getting on other committees' agendas, because I think what's tricky is for all of us to know which hat we're wearing at any point. And so, since we only meet once a month, unless we have a special meeting, it's hard to know what is our committee's position on an issue. And so for late breaking things, anyway, I feel like we should just have a little bit more conversation about what are some of the kind of parameters around when we can represent this committee at other committees.
Yeah, and just quickly, I'll give an example, like a community council. So a community council, when they come to the assembly meeting, have more time to share on behalf of their council. If you are a citizen that happens to be on that council, that does not afford you additional time. And so I think that's a process that this committee can determine. What is our process for determining when you're representing the committee and when you're just representing yourself?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. Thanks for both those things. Let's go on to kind of our main piece, which is hearing from Felix. And okay, I know that you all have changed positions just recently, right? So Felix, you're still the co-chair for housing and homelessness, right? And is it still you and Christopher Constant?
At this point.
So I am the chair of the committee, and Mr. Constant was the vice chair of the committee, and there is not yet selected a new vice chair of the committee.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to make sure we were knowing who was who. So Pastor May and I have been communicating back and forth with Felix a bit over the last couple weeks because so many things have been happening. And you all got some emails through Jasmine with some updates, I think about a week ago, and then also today, so that you'd have some information to kind of prepare us for this conversation with Felix so he doesn't have to retell us everything that's happened. But we did go ahead and provide Felix with just some questions to speak to kind of get into some of the issues. And today we thought we'd really focus on what's been happening just recently around shelter. There's also a lot going on around housing and some of the longer term strategies. We did ask Felix to talk a little bit about these new two task forces that are being set up. So that's where we're going to focus tonight. And then of course we can always have more. This is definitely a topic that's on our priorities and our work plan. So as the committee wills, we can have more conversation on this, and we will make sure that we have time to identify kind of our next 3 presentations before we adjourn tonight. So that's me talking to myself to remember to do that. You can prod me. So go ahead, Felix. You can launch in.
Great, thanks. So what I'm going to do, Thea, is since we're limited on time, I am going to go ahead and just go through all of the questions and answers. And then after that, I'm happy to take any questions that folks have, but I want to make sure that folks get the full context.
And maybe just before you start, Felix, this portion of the meeting we're hoping is kind of a discussion. So it's, a time for members to ask questions, to share opinions. We want this to be kind of our committee to committee dialogue. So that's the spirit we're going into right now. So go ahead, Felix.
Thanks, Thea. I absolutely want that, but I also want to make sure that folks get the full context.
Oh no, totally.
So,
yeah, I was changing what you were saying. Yeah. No, you're great.
Thanks. So first is the first question that you asked was, can you provide an update on the recent decisions made regarding emergency shelter at the Sullivan, and share why the Assembly decided to close the emergency shelter site while there is no plan for low barrier shelter after this weekend for most, and after May 30th for anyone. So the Assembly made a wide variety of funding decisions on Tuesday. I think the ones that are most relevant to discussion are funding for housing. So we funded $750,000 in repairs, and then another $250,000 in startup costs to get 85 units online at the former Golden Lion, which the administration is telling people that they can turn on by mid-May. We funded outreach, approximately $1.15 million for 4 different types of outreach. 1 contact-driven outreach which is the traditional type of outreach that is done, to housing-driven outreach, which is a little bit more extensive. We're really focusing on housing individuals. One would ask, well, wouldn't you do that in contract-driven outreach? No, that is not what you do in contract-driven outreach. Also in housing-driven outreach, getting people ready for housing, because there's a lot of steps that people need to take in order to even get the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. Third is mobility and medical needs outreach. So what we can do to assist people who have mobility or medical needs and get them into other more appropriate situations. And then mobile navigation services. So the type of navigation services that folks really need to get an ID or to get on a voucher list or any of those other type of navigation services, providing that in a mobile fashion. So that's what we funded for outreach. We also funded a unified funding proposal, approximately $1.55 million of basic safety net, ties in directly with the Anchorage home plan, things like Covenant House, Complex Care, Brother Francis Shelter, and the 3rd Avenue Resource Center. We funded homelessness prevention, approximately $500,000 to stop people from being evicted at the guest house, and then provide other supports at the housing projects that the Anchorage Affordable Housing and Land Trust have taken on. So the former guest house, the former Barrett Inn, the former Lake Shore, now known as the Lake House. We provided funding to keep the Sullivan open, approximately $326,000 to do 3 things. 1, to keep the Sullivan open for all populations, all persons, for basically another day, really another 12 hours. It was originally slated for April 30th, which is a Sunday, and that's really difficult for providers and service folks to do all of the final work on that Sunday, so moved it over to Monday. To keep the Sullivan open for up to 90 individuals who have a condition which substantially impairs their daily activity or mobility to the end of May. And then 3, a set-aside fund for non-critical transport for those who have mobility issues. So what does that definition mean exactly? Individuals who have a condition which substantially impairs their daily activity or mobility. There are 2 criteria questions there that are being asked of everyone who's staying at the Sullivan right now. One is, can this person perform activities of daily living? And if the answer to that is no, then would this person be at risk if not at a low barrier shelter? So that's one criteria question. The second criteria question is, does this person have mobility issues? And if yes, does the mobility issue put this person at risk if not at a low barrier shelter? So it is more that the definition and the criteria are more inclusive than people who just have mobility issues. For example, it could include a paranoid schizophrenic who would be at risk at the element outdoors. They would fit in that definition which the Assembly approved and in those 2 criteria questions. So going back to the question of why, a few things. 1, the decision that we made provided a kick in the ass to the providers and the people doing the work. It was a very necessary kick in the ass, and I'm not going to apologize for it. People sleeping at the Sullivan, a couple of census numbers. 1, people sleeping at the Sullivan on Monday night was about 330 individuals. People sleeping at the Sullivan on Wednesday night was about 257 individuals. 330 down to 257. People are getting connected to the resources that they need, connected into the housing or other places that they need, and then they're making their own decisions because client choice is at the center of all of this work. Funding. Do we continue to fund emergency, or do we fund more permanent solutions and prevention that will have more upstream impacts? Also, when it comes to funding, we don't have any money left over. On Tuesday, we used all of the extraneous funding that we had available to us until we get audited financials in September. And at that point, we'll have a better picture of how much money we have left over in fund balance in September. And third, neighborhood impacts. Frankly, this Assembly is done continuing decisions that have led to inequity on good behavior. So that's the response to that question. You did ask another question, why were only physical disabilities considered, etc. And I think the definition that I provided and the criteria prove that it is a bit more expansive of the population that we're talking about. Were other disparities considered in making the decision to close the Sullivan? You included in your question a Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness data that shows that 50% of people experiencing homelessness have a disability. And actually what the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness data dashboard shows that it's roughly 49% in the municipality of Anchorage have a disabling condition, which is not necessarily a disability, which goes to show that data dashboards need to have a lot more definitions and guidance. Because I made that same error and was quickly corrected after making that error. The better definition, I think, that more directly ties to disability, including physical and mental disability, is the connection to the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority. And the coalition does have that data, and the data that they show is, and I think this is actually statewide, this number, so I had to pull it again for Anchorage specific, but statewide the number is 35.7%. People who are beneficiaries of the Alaska Mental Health Trust Authority. Important to note that all of that data that's on that data dashboard is self-reported data. In terms of the, you also asked, did we consider Alaska Native people, and the other racial and ethnic categories. So in the long term, there's work that I am spearheading to provide culturally responsive pathways in this work on homelessness through the alcohol tax, but that is long term. In the short term, no, we did not look at some of the other data points that you mentioned other than disability. That is one that we did look at. Can you update the committee on the other activities that were funded, such as the Housing Summit and Outreach? I already talked about Outreach and why the Assembly decided to fund those rather than extend emergency shelter at the Sullivan. So the total funding that we had available without making any cuts to the budget was approximately $8.4 million. That was the bucket that we had to play around with, quote unquote. And so $6 million of that was from alcohol tax fund balance. In quick definition, that's not that there was an extra $6 million in alcohol tax that we didn't fund. It's that the administration failed to move forward with $6 million worth of projects and RFPs that we did fund in the 2022 budget. So that's $6 million from that fund balance. And then $2.4 million under the tax cap capacity, which put those two together, that's $8.4 million. The Housing Summit, since it was specifically mentioned in your question, we funded $80,000 for the Housing Summit, just in relation, since you did put this question in relation to extension of the Sullivan. That $80,000 gets you about 2 days at the Sullivan for 360 people. The math basically coming down to $100 per person per day. Other things that we funded were the Spenard Corridor parking study, parking for AFD for Fire Station 1, public access to Campbell Lake, security cameras at the Lusac Library, graffiti busters, public transportation, housing studies, a real estate consultant to focus on housing in Girdwood, a stipend for the youth, the Assembly Youth Representative and the alternate, local match for the Connecting Communities grants, that Fairview one, training for community councils, pre-approved building plans to make it cheaper to build and quicker to build housing, $2 million in prevention and early education grants, Anchorage Fire Department equipment in response to PFAS concerns, PFAS, however you pronounce that, expanding the Dolly Parton Imagination Library program municipal-wide. It was only in a few areas, so we expanded it municipal-wide. $1 million to help fund the Crisis Sterilization Center that Providence is working on. And so they had a $5.6 million funding gap, so now they have a $4.6 million funding gap. And I made it pretty clear to everyone who has asked about funding that there was no way, period, point blank, that we were ever going to get 100% of those $8.4 million going to shelter or dealing with emergency needs. And in fact, I would be surprised if even 50% of those funds would have been approved for those needs. There are a lot of competing priorities for the budget, all of which, frankly, are important as well. And it goes back to the policy decision to either continue with funding of constant emergency, or do we move beyond that emergency And we made, as the Assembly, the policy call to stop funding a constant emergency so that we can get to permanent solutions. And that is what I am focused on 1,000%. Another question you asked is, what actions is the municipality taking to ensure the safety of people who are unsheltered and to ensure the safety of other community members after May 30th? How will the municipality mitigate impacts on midtown and downtown businesses during the tourist season for people seeking shelter in public spaces and businesses? So the Fairview Community Council actually sent us a letter with a long list of action items, which I believe the North Anchorage Assembly members, so Christopher Constant and Daniel Voland, they're working on moving forward with implementation of those various action items. Most of the suggestions that the Fairview Community Council put forward were in the APD arena. So they were a public safety sort of first responder response. I talked about outreach, but that absolutely is that category of ensuring the safety and well-being of our unsheltered community. We also put up a RFI, request for information, to see if we can get other non-congregate locations stood up. Granted, we have to find to get those other non-congregate locations stood up. We haven't been notified of any, so we will see if any non-congregate locations decide to be a part of this effort and spare us some rooms or whatever that non-congregate location looks like. There are a couple of task forces that were stood up. I'll talk about those later. The Section Camp Task Force and the Complex Behavioral Needs Task Force. And then the long term, we are working on shelter. Specifically, the Clean Slate Strategy looks at shelter. It's going to be kicking off with community engagements throughout this month and in early May through the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness, and then town halls in May and June. I would go to the website for more information. It's on the Assembly website, specifically our homelessness focus page. The goal with the Clean Slate Strategy is to get new shelters stood up by the end of the year, if at all possible by November 1. Long-term work on housing is happening, so we're working with community partners on more hotel conversions. Granted, there's probably not avenues for more hotel conversions. We probably maybe have 2-3 more max that we can do in this community, just because most of our hotels are actually used quite a bit. We do have some housing summit work that's going to be happening from May through sometime in the fall, August, September time, where we're really going to be focusing on housing policy and the tactics and strategy and policies to get more housing online. And then we are also pushing forward with what we can do to help housing projects that have maybe been on the edge of being feasible. A lot of housing projects are maybe only a couple $1 million away from actually penciling out. So what we can do to push those projects forward. And I guess one last point that I want to make on this is in terms of the funding, we need more equitable funding on homelessness in Anchorage. And there's this comparison that a couple of Assembly members like to make, especially Assembly Member Christopher Constant, between Houston, Texas, and Anchorage. So both Houston and Anchorage have a comparable number of people experiencing homelessness, roughly around 30,000 individuals. Houston, from the federal government, gets a bit over $40 million. I think it's like $44 or $45 million annually from the feds on homelessness. Anchorage, with the same population of people experiencing homelessness, gets a little over $4 million annually on homelessness. And that's largely driven by federal funding formulas, which provide those equitable outcomes. Next question you asked, there has been a lot of success related to housing. What are the options for meeting this need by May 30th or later this year? So there's 3 options. First is the former Barrett Inn. There are 96 units at that location. Some are set aside for permanent supportive housing through Home for Good. So folks who likely sort of fit the need of having some type of disability, mental or physical disability, and who would be hard to serve in traditional housing. And Barrett Inn is accepting the former Barrett Inn. Whatever the new name is, I don't know. They're currently accepting referrals and applications. the former Lake Shore, now known as the Lake House. That's 45 units there. It's mainly workforce housing, so you do need to come with some type of income or a job. That is something that's a bit of a requirement for that particular facility. Which, by the way, there are a lot of people experiencing homelessness who have jobs who would qualify for that. I've actually talked to a couple at the Sullivan who are staying there, who have jobs, who can afford market rate rents, but can afford the Lake House. The Lake House is accepting referrals and applications. I do expect the Lake House probably to be full by the end of May. The former Golden Lion, so that's 85 units, opening in mid-May or June. The administration is pushing for folks with mobility issues to go there, but we'll see what that looks like in the end. No applications are opened up for that just yet. A couple last questions and then happy to have a discussion. So can you talk about the two task forces, their purpose, and who will serve on them? So there's two task forces, the Sanctioned Camp Task Force. They are providing recommendations by July 6th to the Assembly and Administration. And it's basically looking at all of the different models of sanctioned camps, which I use as an umbrella term. So tiny home villages, dignity villages, actual, tent camps, all of those different models all fall under what I call sanctioned camps. And so they're going to be looking at all of those models, including a few models that have been brought to the Assembly, things like pallet shelters, the Anchorage School District relocatable buildings. I think we have something like 40 of those buildings that the school district has donated to the municipality. And they're going to be looking at all of those different options and providing different sets of recommendations based off all of those different models for sanctioned camps by July 6th to the Assembly. And then from there, it is a policy and a funding decision, because everything we do, we're going to have to make the policy, and then we're going to have to fund it, right? We're going to have to find the funding for it. In terms of the type of people who are going to be serving on it, it's a pretty broad list. Community advocates, neighborhood organizations, individuals with lived experience, service providers, nonprofits, medical providers, businesses, municipal agencies whose mission, and all of those, whose mission and experience fits within the description of this task force. In terms of the Complex Behavioral Needs Task Force, they're going to be providing short-term recommendations by June 1, and providing mid to long-term recommendations by September 5th to the Assembly and Administration. They're also going to be providing those same levels of recommendations on a similar timeline to the state of Alaska. In terms of the people serving on them, pretty similar, except for we're having a lot more state agencies who are going to be part of the Complex Behavioral Needs Task Force. Last question, how can our committee help? So I invite folks to be engaged in all of the conversations that we're going to be having. There's a lot. So much that's going to be happening through the end of this year on housing and homelessness. It would be very helpful for people, for this committee, to offer specific and actionable suggestions before critical policy decisions are made. And then, speaking of specific and actionable suggestions, it would also be very helpful for this committee to write a letter to our congressional delegation about the funding formula inequity issue that I mentioned earlier. The comparison to Houston and Anchorage. That's it. Thanks. Happy to have a discussion.
Awesome. Thank you, Felix. Super comprehensive. Who would like to start with feedback or questions or comments? If you're on Zoom, raise your hand if you're here. Go for it. Pastor May, then Lori.
I'll let Lori go first.
Okay, Lori, then Pastor May.
Thanks, Felix. Are there any discussions at all happening about investing in the prefab home parks where so many people live, especially within the immigrant community that often struggle with water, appropriate water and sewer and trash removal and all those issues? I feel like they are often left out of the unhoused, and I consider people when they have to live 2 and 3 families together to be unhoused and needing extra support.
Do you mean in addition to the Sanctioned Camp Task Force? Do you mean people who are living in those currently, or those as solutions?
I am thinking of them in terms of where the city's investing money and trying to like make places livable and keeping them in mind while they're working on it.
So I'm wondering if you can ask your question again, but please speak in the mic. I'm having difficulty hearing.
Yeah, maybe just say it again.
Sorry, I felt like I was speaking way into it. I'm asking about the mobile home or the prefab home parks. And we, as in the immigrant community especially, we see multiple families and multiple people living in conditions there that I would consider them, based on how I define unhoused, to be considered unhoused, and investing in those areas as water or sewer, other things seem to really need to be addressed in there when the city is looking at investing money in housing and in the unhoused.
Okay, so just to clarify, Laura, you're saying, are we considering improving infrastructure in existing mobile home parks? I was having a similar thought this week. That's a great question. Has that been on the table, Felix?
Yeah, thanks. Happy to answer that. And that's actually the Forest Park mobile home park issue has actually brought this to the forefront for the Assembly. So a couple responses. First is I put forward in the budget $50,000 to do a feasibility study of manufactured housing communities. It is a new type of development, not necessarily new, but it's a type of development that we don't really use too much in the municipality of Anchorage. And sort of one example of a manufactured housing community is I think it's the Four Seasons that Widener Apartment manages. That is a manufactured housing community. And so that feasibility study is basically meant to look at all of the different, to see if this is a possible option for, in the long term, possibly replacing those dilapidated mobile home parks, which we know exist in a lot of parts in our community. And in fact, likely a lot of our existing mobile home parks, if let's just say code enforcement were to shed a very stringent light on them, would probably be in the same situation as Forest Park mobile home park, which, getting to that specific scenario, Forest Park mobile home park is actually they are being evicted, as I understand it, by the municipality because of code enforcement issues, significant issues with safety and health and water. And so there was a resolution that was laid on the table and passed at our last Assembly meeting on the 25th, 2 days ago, where my committee, because my committee isn't busy enough already, but happy to take this on, where my committee is tasked with looking at both immediate, so 30-day, and then long-term, so 60 days or later, solutions to how we can help folks at the Forest Park mobile home park. So it is definitely something that we are looking at, both long-term to see how we can replace these mobile home parks, and then short-term deal with the most immediate issue we have, which is Forest Park. I think beyond that, just to share a little bit of a caveat, there are some Assembly members who are very concerned about using public dollars on what essentially are private industry and individuals who are probably making a decent amount of money who own these mobile home parks. So that is something sort of policy-wise that I think the Assembly is going to have to come to grips with.
Great, thank you, Felix. Celeste.
Hopefully you can hear me. I just want to first of all say this information is really helpful. Thank you, Felix, and your team for bringing this forward, and I'm happy to see it on the horizon. I'm wondering about two things. First of all, the concerns that we're having with the with the building that we purchased, and the situation, which is really becoming really, it's worse, it's more than frustrating. It's one thing to hear about these issues, but it's another thing to live it. And so, with the graffiti now on our building, with people doing drugs and all the arrests, and it's like our building that we still have so much hope for is becoming an eyesore. And so I'm wondering, with all the funding, is there something that can be done now? Because when we call for assistance from, and I hate to get APD involved, but they're busy and they say things like they're not able to really help out at the level that's needed at this particular location now. And so is there anything, I heard you talk about graffiti busters, now that we have graffiti on our building, and it's becoming even more daily. And somebody almost died there, I understand, recently. I think it was yesterday. And so what can we do to get assistance? Because while we're a nonprofit organization that received the funding to do some work with this building, and by the way, we did just bring on board Bauer Construction, so they're going to be our contractors to do the renovation work, but that doesn't start until later this month. What can we do? Because this is worse than we ever imagined.
Yeah, thanks, Celeste. So a few things. Yes, the Graffiti Busters program is going to be coming back online, so that specific part of what you mentioned. I imagine at some point they will be an announcement about the program coming online and the phone number to call, which I forget what that phone number is. Then there will be a lot of outreach happening, right? So you will see a lot of outreach workers from all of the various agencies that have outreach workers. You'll see them out and about a lot this summer, and that I think will hopefully help be a connective tissue to folks who are willing and able to get into services. For the most part, I think a lot of this issue is that folks need a place to go that is safe and that they want to go to. And so folks that you are seeing at your building don't want to go to the Sullivan. They don't think it is safe. They don't want to go to the Brother Francis shelter, even though the BFS has gotten a lot better. There is a long history and stigma of BFS not being safe. So, that does make it a very difficult situation. And that's why I'm thinking a lot of these task forces, specifically the Sanctioned Camp Task Force, if we can get a buy-in and assembly support, and if something actually makes sense to do from the recommendations we get from the Sanctioned Camp Task Force, could provide some of those kinds of solutions that we really haven't had in the past for the individuals who don't have another place to go that they want to go to. And that is the critical piece. That is all client choice driven. Beyond that, I'm going to tell you what I tell everyone, which is that if you see something unsafe or need to report an unsafe activity, to call 311 or to call ASP if he feels like it fits in the mission and the category of folks who get calls for ASP.
Okay, so really quickly, because I know others probably have things to share as well. We've called 311, we've called ASP, our neighbors are calling them left and right, and I can send you a bunch of emails and text messages, which I know, you get enough of those already. But the folks are doing drugs. That's part of the reason why they don't want to stay anywhere. They are free to do drugs on the streets. Police won't do anything. I mean, I just came back from Chicago, and it was nothing in comparison to what's happening in Anchorage right now. It's bad here. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Okay, we just have a few minutes left, so I want to ask the question of the committee of what, and it says presentations on the agenda, but I guess one thing I want to make clear is that I know all of us are here because we want to help solve problems. We've talked a lot about this being an action-oriented group. So Felix, I don't want you to feel like you're on the hot seat and we're like asking you, what are you gonna do about this? I mean, I think we're all in this together, and I think that's how we should approach these discussions. So I don't think they're so much presentations as they are topics and people that we want to have dialogue with, so that we can all be working together and be knowledgeable about what's happening. So with that, what 3, topics or people should we be inviting for our next meetings? And just to bring back some of the ones we've talked about, obviously housing and homelessness is an important one. We've talked about Crisis Now, and we haven't really had an update from them in a while. And I'm kind of drawing a blank on our other ones.
Yeah.
But let's come up with 3, and then we can be working on getting those spaced out over the next few meetings. And then we also know we want to have another work session. I think we said kind of late summer for that. So Felix and Celeste and then Key, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I've been on the phone. I did not hear everything, but could somebody tell me what the average homelessness is at any given time?
Key, you can go on to aceh.org, aceh.org, and there's a data dashboard there, and you can do all sorts of filtering and yeah.
And also earlier, I think Felix mentioned that the surveys on disabling conditions, not necessarily disability, was self-reported, or is that what I heard?
Yeah, I mean, it's all self-reported in the sense that people are being assessed, so they're being asked questions, and that's what goes onto the, so it's all self-reported, yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's pretty normal.
It could be not necessarily very accurate, because it's based on what they are telling you, right? The assessment.
I mean, it's as accurate as any other health data. I mean,
I see other people wanting to talk, and we are running out of time. My last question is that, I guess we could take it, the error rate could be, quite off. And are we planning on providing some kind of programs where, to the extent they are able to be active, they can contribute to programs so that they are not just sitting idle, because idleness is what's also causing the homelessness.
Let me do this. Let me do this going forward. I will recommend that we extend by 10 minutes so that we can maybe get a couple other questions in, whatever and have you. So if everybody's agreeable with that, we'll extend.
Any opposition to that?
I did not hear that.
We're asking if we can extend the meeting by 10 minutes, Key. So.
Oh, yes, I'm okay.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm hearing, Key, is that for a future meeting, you'd like to have more conversation around housing and homelessness. Is this a topic you want to hear more about and talk more about going forward?
I think we need to come up with not just housing them, but, we need to help with their lifestyles. Without changing their lifestyles, it can only grow. And it's heartbreaking to hear other people's stories.
It sounds like what would be useful actually is maybe to have some providers who are working with people experiencing homelessness and who could speak a little bit more to what types of engagement, what types of employment training. And actually, it'll be great to have Leanne here because CITC does a lot of that work, and so I think we could arrange something on that topic. Okay. I see Felix has his hand up, and then Celeste. Go ahead. Oh, and sorry, and Christy. Yep. Okay, so go ahead, Felix.
Oh, actually, my hand was raised because Christy's comment was there, and I don't think anyone had addressed it.
Go ahead, because I can't see the chat from here. So go ahead, Felix.
Well, Christy's hand is up though, I think she might want to talk about it.
Okay, great. Let's go to Christy.
I apologize. For some reason, my computer's acting up. Just real quickly, I don't want to take up too much time, but I did have a question for Felix. One, thank you so much for acknowledging that there is a definition difference between disability and disabling condition that is extremely important for providers to understand and for the community to understand so that we can better educate people on disability rights. And then in that regard, what, I guess, just from my experience on both sides of the aisle working in the community and being disabled myself, what safeguards are being taken for those that are, I guess, are they only self-reporting their disability or their disabling condition, or are they actually being assessed? Because as much as I hate to say this, there are a lot of individuals who will say that they have a disability or even a disabling condition and not, actually need the services that they are requesting. So I want to be super careful that those that really need the services are getting them and are not getting shortchanged by those that are trying to take advantage of them.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's a good question. So it's an assessment. So basically it is the provider heading overlaid with the third-party oversight the Assembly brought on, restorative and reentry services. Those two entities are doing assessments of everyone who is left at the Sullivan to see if they qualify in those two questions and the subsequent questions that I asked.
Okay. And did I hear you correctly that some, I think it was one of the hotel options would be an option for those with mobility issues? And if that's the case, are we looking at making sure that there are enough ADA rooms and accommodations in those facilities?
Yeah, thanks. So the administration has an idea for the Golden Lion, the former Golden Lion, that one being specifically for folks who may have a disability. And so that is what they're pushing. My only concern is that I'm not exactly sure if the former Golden Lion would fit for that, for exactly the reason that you ask. I'm not sure how ADA friendly that particular building is. And on top of that, a lot of the times, especially when it comes to housing, it would be very difficult, I think, to pinpoint a specific population and say for a particular housing that they are the population for that facility. That's not generally the way that housing works in the homelessness prevention response system. It's typically done off of a coordinated entry list. So all that to say that we're still working through all of the details, but that is something the administration did hint at.
There is typically, and I don't know the exact numbers, but if memory serves me correctly, I think a hotel, and it may depend on how many rooms in total that they have, but typically they only have to have 2 rooms, I believe, per floor. So that is also something to take into consideration as well. Last question is it too late, or how would someone like myself get on this task force? Because I would be very interested in helping out.
Yeah, thanks. So no, it is not too late. And I would say email me. So if anyone wants to email me about these task forces, that's the best way to keep in the loop. So that's felix.rivera@anchorageak.gov.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So Christy, I'm also taking from your questions that it might be useful to have the Aging and Disability Resource Center come to our meeting, and maybe someone from the health department as well, so we can ask some more specific questions. And
I would definitely suggest someone from disability and senior services and from those other 2 groups as well.
Cool. Okay. Celeste, we're giving you the last word because we still need to do audience participation. So go ahead, Celeste.
All right, so really quickly, we had a brief discussion on the comments that were made from, I think she's the deputy director at the health department, or at the library or something, I can't remember. But at any rate, there's a lot of work that we need to do right there as it relates to discrimination and issues surrounding race. So I'm not sure what that is, but I don't want us to lose sight that that is happening right here at the municipality of Anchorage with one of our gatekeepers. And I know that there's others, so I just wanted that on the record. Thanks.
Okay, so Celeste, are you suggesting that we invite someone to the meeting to specifically address the situation that was the subject of the article that Cameron referred to?
That would be good if there was such a person.
Okay.
That could respond.
You can make a request to the city manager or the chief of staff to ask them to attend the meeting to address it.
Okay, cool. Pastor May, you had, I skipped over you, so.
Yeah, we're getting close to our limit. Are we still dealing with housing? This is our next invites.
I think I'm turning everything into next invites, so yeah, so keep going with that.
I had a quick question, and I actually kind of wanted a point blank answer, nothing specifically in detail. This is from Mr. Felix, and forgive me for having to go to the men's room to be part of your discussion. But my question was centered around the can you update the committee on other activities that were funded, the expanded outreach in the housing summit versus extended emergency shelter at the Sullivan, and you responded by saying about the $8.4 million that you had to play around with and how all of that was divvied up, but it was to a lot of other areas that are outside of this specific question. And so I guess in a roundabout way, I'm asking why those monies for the summit were not put toward extending the summit. I know it was a contractual issue as a result of attending your last meeting, but and so it was extended by a day. But why weren't some of those funds put in extended beyond that? And was that a determinative decision made that that was not something the Assembly wanted to do?
Yeah, thanks. So I think I addressed that question fairly well, but I'm happy to do that again. So essentially what we have here is a policy decision that the policymakers made. Are we going to continue pouring in money to extend usage at the Sullivan? Or are we going to look at putting money into other things that could provide long-term permanent solutions to the housing crisis that we are facing in the municipality of Anchorage? With the votes that were cast at the Assembly meeting, I think it's clear the policy decision that the policymakers made, which was to extend for a specific population to the end of May, and to put our money into housing.
Excuse me, for time's sake, I got that, I was clear on that, but I guess I was just kind of interested in a point blank answer as to why no Sullivan, and I think I have it now relative to wanting to put funds in other places rather than extending. And so that would be sufficient for my answer. Thank you, sir.
And Celeste, I see your hand is up, but is that from your previous question or comment?
Yes, that's previous. Thanks.
Okay, sorry. Okay, any audience participation? Okay, hearing none. Final question, do we want to have a crisis now update? Is anyone else interested in that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, any opposition to that? Hi, Panna. Okay, so I think I have three things just to close that loop. We want to hear about kind of supports for people experiencing homelessness, especially people with disabilities, learn more about assessment, engagement, employment, those types of things. We want to talk about the library employee and the reports about her racist speech. and get a crisis now update. And then Pastor May reminded me that our work session is meant to happen in June, so we've got that on the docket too. So I think that kind of takes us through our next few meetings. Any last words before we close, Panna?
I just wanted to hear the end of Assemblyman Rivera's sentence. I felt my perception was he was cut off in mid-sentence. I just wanted to hear the end of what he had to say.
Okay. Do we mind extending for another 3 minutes?
And he can speak to me one-on-one.
And it's okay.
If there's
No, it's
an
fine.
issue with extending.
As long as no one objects, that's fine.
No problem with extending. Forgive me for cutting him off like that, but I was already privy to what he was repeating and just wanted that point blank, yes. Anyway, sorry about that.
Go ahead, Felix.
Oh, no problem. No, so basically I was saying that, and I'll be brief, so repeating myself, that we as an assembly made a policy decision, and that is to focus on housing, as well as we know we need additional permanent shelter. So those are the things that we are going to focus on. We funded a lot of housing work. We funded some shelter work as well, but the decision was pretty clear for the assembly is we want to fund less and less emergency shelter, and by emergency I mean constant emergency shelter, and we want to fund more and more housing. And so those were the decisions that we made.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay. Any final words? Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you in a month.
Do we need to officially adjourn the meeting?
I don't know. Felt official. Yeah. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye.